The cold wind had barely settled against my coat when the front door flew open, and my grandfather's voice carved through the air with a confusion so sharp it almost stung. "Selene," Alistair said slowly, brows knitting together. "Why on earth did you come by taxi? What happened to the terrain I gifted you?" The question hung there, simple, innocent, heavy. The kind of question that shouldn't have been complicated. I inhaled, ready to explain how the car wasn't exactly mine anymore, how it had slipped out of my hands over months of subtle pushes and shrinking boundaries. I parted my lips. But before a single truth could escape, a voice behind him floated forward, light, practiced, and sweetened with the exact amount of false charm she used whenever she needed to control a narrative. "Vivianne." She stepped into the doorway with a polished smile that never reached her eyes. "Oh, Dad," she chimed breezily, "Selene doesn't have that car anymore. It made more sense for Brielle to use it. You know how busy she is." The words landed like ice cracking under my feet. I stared at her, stunned, not by the statement, because I had lived that reality for months, but by how effortlessly she said it. How she packaged a theft as a logical family decision. Behind her, the house was filled with warmth, cooking spices, and the faint hum of conversation. And yet I felt strangely outside of it, like I had arrived at a stranger's home instead of the place where I'd celebrated every childhood holiday. I hadn't even crossed the threshold, and already the night was unraveling. "My what?" Alistair asked, voice low, almost gentle. "What do you mean she doesn't have it?" From the dining room, Brielle appeared, perfect hair, careful makeup, and a glowing ring light still shining behind her like a cheap halo. She sipped from a glass and gave a tiny wave, performing casual innocence. "It's just logistics, Grandpa," she said, shrugging as if we were discussing a spare sweater. "I have shoots all over the city. Selene mostly stays in her little workshop, right? It's not like she needs to drive every day." My fingers curled around the box of fragile wooden ornaments I had brought. I swallowed hard. Vivianne gave a soft laugh, the same airy sound she used whenever she wanted to disguise something selfish as something sensible. "Sweetheart," she said to me, "you hardly use your car. You're practically glued to that studio of yours. Brielle actually needs reliable transportation. It's practical. Practical. Efficient. Reasonable." She had 1,000 ways of saying your needs don't matter without ever admitting she was saying it. Alistair's jaw tightened. "Selene," he said gently, "is that true?" The question startled me more than the situation itself. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because I wasn't used to being asked for one. In our house, silence had always been my safest language. I opened my mouth, but Brielle cut in again, hair flipping over her shoulder in a rehearsed arc. "If Selene planned better," she chirped, "none of this would be weird. I'm the one who has to be everywhere. It just makes sense that I'm the one driving." Something in me twitched, small, thin, like a frayed thread pulled taut. I'd ignored so many versions of this moment. The weekend borrowing that became weekdays. The quick errand that became permanent keys in Brielle's purse. The subtle dismissal every time I asked for what was supposed to be mine. None of it had shocked me. Until now, watching my sister sip water like she was the wronged one, something inside me burned low and steady. Alistair's gaze never left mine. His eyes were sharp, searching, quietly furious, but not at me. Inside the house, Corbin kept his seat, shoulder slumped, expression carefully blank. He'd always been that way, warm in theory, but allergic to conflict, especially if it meant standing between Vivianne and the truth. The room watched me. The air waited for me. "I didn't give the car away," I finally said, voice thin but steady. "It started as borrowing. Then it became something else." "Selene," Vivianne snapped softly, "let's not exaggerate. You weren't using it. And Brielle's career actually requires mobility." My career, my small ornament studio that smelled of paint and pine, the thing I had built with my own 2 hands, didn't even qualify as valid in her world unless she needed to brag about it. I felt the heat rise in my chest, not loud, not explosive, but sharp and contained. I use it to transport my work, I said. To run my business. Brielle rolled her eyes. Your craft stuff? Selene, please. You can Uber. It's literally a business expense. The sentence hit me like a quiet slap. Not enough to bruise, but enough to humiliate. Alistair slowly turned to them, his expression shifting in a way I had only seen once before, in a hospital waiting room many years ago. Controlled. Cold. Absolute. None of you had the right to reassign a gift I gave to my granddaughter, he said. Silence spread across the dining room like frost. Vivianne swallowed. Dad, for heaven's sake, it's just a car. It's not the car, he replied. It's the pattern. He looked at me again, eyes knowing, seeing, protective. And for the first time in a very long while, I didn't feel invisible. I stepped inside slowly, the box of ornaments still against my ribs, and the warmth of the house brushed against my skin without reaching me. Dinner continued around me as if nothing monumental had just happened. Vivianne resumed talking about Brielle's collaborations, Corbin nodded dutifully, and Brielle checked her phone between bites as if her reflection mattered more than the truth. Only Alistair watched me, quiet, steady, and deeply aware that something inside me had cracked open. Hours later, when I left and slid into the cold backseat of a rideshare, while Brielle drove away in my car, I didn't cry. Not at first. But when I unlocked my workshop, switched on the single flickering lamp above my bench, and sank to the floor surrounded by boxes of unshipped orders, the tears finally came. Soft. Slow. Exhausted. I wasn't crying for the car. I was crying for every inch of myself I had handed over without even noticing it. When the tears dried, a strange calm settled over me. An unfamiliar clarity. I opened my laptop. I began checking statements. Every line. Every charge. Every favor disguised as family help. Purchases I never made. Bills I never approved. Transfers labeled temporary support. Subscriptions for Brielle's content tools. Expenses Vivianne had pinned on me during tight months. Nearly $9,000. My breath caught. Not because of the money, but because of the realization that I hadn't been failing. I had been drained. And someone, finally, was going to see it. My phone buzzed. Alistair. Come tomorrow, he said. We need to talk. His tone wasn't worried. It was ready. So was I. But when dawn came and I walked into my grandfather's house, I had no idea just how much he already knew, or how far he was prepared to go to expose the truth. Before we continue the story, tell me in the comments what your name is and where you're listening from, and please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories. Alistair's house was always warm, but the morning air held a different kind of weight when I arrived, dense, heavy, almost ceremonial. His old truck sat in the driveway, dusted with frost, and light spilled from the windows like someone waiting for a confession. When I stepped inside, I froze. The dining table had been pulled to the center of the room, cleared of its usual stack of mail and newspaper clippings. Instead, two thick stacks of paper sat neatly side by side. One was mine. The ledger I'd created last night, every unauthorized charge, every dollar siphoned from my account under the comforting disguise of family. The other stack I didn't recognize. Alistair stood beside the table with his arms crossed. His expression was calm, but his jaw, usually soft with age, was set in a way I'd only seen a few times in my life. Times when he was preparing to protect someone he loved. Sit, he said quietly. I did. He took my stack first. He didn't flip through it quickly or skim. He read every page. Every line. The silence in the room grew thick, pressing against my lungs. When he finally finished, he tapped the papers into alignment. This isn't confusion, he said. This is exploitation. The word landed with a thud. Exploitation. Not misunderstanding. Not family sharing. Not support. Exploitation. I swallowed hard, my hands resting flat on my thighs. You've been carrying their weight, he continued, while they've been adding more to your shoulders every year. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. He placed a hand on the second stack. And these, he said, are mine. He tapped the papers lightly, and for a moment, he looked 10 years younger, sharper, clearer, dangerous in the way only quiet men become when they finally decide to stop tolerating something. I've kept records, he said simply. 4 years. Things your mother wouldn't want anyone to see. My heart stuttered. Records of what? Of how this family has treated you, he said. Of every time Vivianne redirected resources in Brielle's favor. Of every time Corbin looked away. Of every instance where your work was treated like a side hobby instead of a livelihood. I stared at him, stunned. Why didn't you ever say anything? He looked at me with something like sorrow. Because you weren't ready to see it. And because I was hoping, wrongly, that they would correct themselves. A beat of silence passed. But after last night, he said, I realized you're not the one who needs correcting. He glanced at the clock. 10 o'clock. They'll be here soon. My breath caught. They're coming here? Now? Yes, he said softly yet firmly. I called them. I told them it was time to address the imbalance they've created. Fear should have risen. But it didn't. Instead, that same strange calm from last night settled over me, like someone turning a dial down on panic and turning clarity up to full volume. Alistair placed his hand briefly on my shoulder. You don't need to argue. You don't need to defend yourself. You only need to tell the truth. I nodded. At exactly 10:03, the door opened. Vivianne strode in first, her perfume arriving half a second before she did. Her expression was tight, as if she'd practiced 100 different versions of the conversation she thought she was about to have. What is this urgent meeting? She said, placing her purse on the table as if she owned the space. Dad, I don't appreciate being summoned. Sit, Alistair said. It wasn't loud. It wasn't harsh. But it landed with the authority of someone who had run farms, raised children, and buried those he loved. She sat. Corbin followed slowly, eyes downcast, shoulders curved inward. He took the seat closest to the wall, as if distance might save him from responsibility. Brielle entered last, tapping on her phone with an almost bored expression, ring light sparkle still in her eyes. She stopped short when she saw the papers. What is this? She asked, chewing her lip like she was waiting for her agent to explain the fine print. Sit, Alistair said again. She did. He didn't waste time. Selene has prepared a record of the money taken from her accounts without her consent, he said plainly. Money redirected to this family. Vivianne laughed, high, brittle. Dad, honestly, this is blown out of proportion. Selene has always been dramatic about finances. He placed his hand on the ledger. This is not drama. This is data. Her smile faltered. Alistair continued, these transactions show years of misuse. Payments for Brielle's equipment. Bills transferred to Selene's account. Purchases labeled as temporary support that were never repaid. Corbin shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Brielle crossed her arms. I never forced her to pay for anything. She offered. No, Alistair interrupted sharply. Selene asked for her car back many times. She asked for financial clarity. She asked for boundaries. And each time, the three of you dismissed her. Vivianne's lips curled. Selene, she snapped, are you really going to sit there and act like a victim? After everything we've done for you? I inhaled slowly. Steadily. I'm not acting, I said. You asked. I recorded. That's all. Her cheeks flushed with anger. So you're making us the villains now? I didn't make anything, I replied softly. I just stopped hiding it. Silence fell, thick, suffocating, undeniable. Alistair tapped the second stack, his own records. And now, he said, it's time for consequences. Vivianne stiffened. What consequences? He met her eyes without blinking. The inheritance fund I planned for both granddaughters? The one I saved for decades? I've reassigned it. Brielle leaned forward. To me, right? She asked, half grinning. No, Alistair said. To Selene. Completely. Brielle's face fell so fast it was almost painful. Corbin finally spoke, voice weak. Dad, maybe we can discuss this. No, Alistair said again. This is not negotiable. This is restitution. Vivianne shot to her feet, chair scraping violently. You are rewarding her for attacking us. For betraying her family. Alistair stepped between us like a shield. She didn't betray you, he said. You betrayed her. And you mistook her quiet for acceptance. His voice was low. Controlled. Terrifying. Vivianne's lips trembled, not with sadness, but fury. Alistair pointed at the papers. This is the truth. And I will not allow this pattern to repeat another year. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. He turned to Brielle next. And the car goes back to her today. Brielle's eyes widened. What? That's not fair. No, he said. It's overdue. I exhaled carefully, for the first time feeling what freedom might taste like. But the moment wasn't over. Not even close. Because what Alistair revealed next wasn't just about money, or a car, or boundaries. It was something my family never expected, a truth strong enough to fracture everything they thought they controlled. For a long moment, no one moved. Vivianne's chest rose and fell in tight, shallow breaths. Corbin stared at the edge of the table like he wished he could disappear into it. Brielle flicked her eyes between each of us, her certainty dissolving into something brittle. Alistair didn't sit. He stood at the head of the table with the quiet authority of someone who had already made peace with the fallout. This family has been circling the same drain for too long, he began. But you three have mistaken Selene's silence for weakness. You've mistaken her generosity for obligation. And today, that ends. Vivianne scoffed. Dad, stop dramatizing. Honestly. He raised a hand, and she froze mid-sentence. There is one more thing, he said. Something you all need to hear. My stomach nodded. I had no idea what he meant, what additional truth he was about to drag into the light, but the look he shot me was soft, protective. And the one he aimed at the rest of them was anything but. He turned one of the documents toward them, one from his own stack, not mine. I started keeping records, he said, because I watched the imbalance grow. At first, it was small. Little things. A few dollars here. A favor there. Borrowing without returning. But the past 2 years, he tapped the paper, have escalated beyond anything acceptable. Brielle leaned forward, brows furrowed. What is that supposed to mean? It means, Alistair said slowly, that Vivianne used Selene's business as a financial cushion far more than Selene ever knew. My pulse spiked. Vivianne bristled. Dad, that's absurd. I only asked for help when the timing was tight. It wasn't a pattern. It was, he said simply. And I have the documentation to prove it. He slid the stack closer to her. Read. Vivianne's eyes darted across the top page. Color drained from her face. Corbin carefully reached for another sheet, gripping it as though it might burn him. His lips parted in a silent breath. What, are these charges? He whispered. Your charges, Alistair replied calmly. Every time Vivianne routed a bill to Selene's account because you two needed a little relief that month. Every time Brielle's equipment was purchased using Selene's card. Every time Selene's work was used to fill a gap in this household. Brielle's jaw dropped. Wait, I thought Mom paid for that stuff. You told me. Vivianne slammed the papers down. Stop turning this into a witch hunt. Everything we did was for the family. Selene never complained. That's because every time she tried, Alistair said, you dismissed her needs as optional. Vivianne pointed a trembling finger at me. You have always been the quiet one. The reliable one. The one who understands when times get tough. Now you're acting like we stole from you. Mom, I said gently but firmly, you did. Her breath hitched. You treated me like a safety net, I continued, feeling that same unfamiliar strength settle into my spine. You never asked what I needed. You never cared if it jeopardized my work. You assumed my stability existed for your convenience. Brielle swallowed hard. Her earlier bravado had cracked completely. Corbin rubbed the back of his neck, shame flickering across his features. Viv, did you really? Oh, don't you start, she snapped at him. You never take responsibility for anything. I managed everything. The bills, the schedules, the girls' needs. At the expense of Selene, Alistair cut in. Vivianne rounded on him. You're taking her side because she's quiet, Dad. Because she's sensitive. No, he said. I'm taking her side because she finally has evidence. Evidence I watched accumulate piece by piece. He turned to me. And because she deserves better. The room went still. A long, heavy silence. Every breath felt measured. Vivianne's eyes glistened, not with sadness, but indignation. I cannot believe this family is turning on me because Selene suddenly wants to play the victim. Something inside me snapped, not loudly, but with the clean, precise sound of a boundary falling into place. I'm not playing anything, I said. I'm telling the truth. And you're upset because the truth doesn't flatter you. Her jaw tightened. So what now? You want us to grovel? You want us to fall apart so you can feel righteous? No, I whispered. I want you to stop taking from me. Alistair stepped closer, placing a hand on my chair. A small gesture. A steadying one. I've already adjusted the inheritance, he said. Selene will receive it alone. Consider it repayment for what was taken. Brielle flinched. Vivianne inhaled sharply. Corbin blinked as though waking from a long sleep. You can't do that, Vivianne hissed. That money was for both girls. And it will be, Alistair replied. If Brielle treats her sister with respect. If she rebuilds trust. If she contributes fairly. Brielle's voice was barely more than a plea. Grandpa. I didn't know all this. I swear I didn't. I believe you, he said gently. But ignorance doesn't erase impact. Brielle's shoulders slumped. Vivianne slammed her palm on the table. This is insane. You're tearing this family apart over a car and some receipts. Alistair leaned forward. His eyes were steel. This isn't about a car. Pause. It's about the way you've diminished Selene's work. Her livelihood. Her boundaries. Her voice. Vivianne opened her mouth. But Alistair wasn't finished. And there's one more truth you all need to hear. My breath caught. He looked at me first, seeking permission without words. I gave a tiny nod. He turned back to them. When Selene started building her ornament studio, I set aside additional funds for her. Not because I loved her more. Vivianne scoffed. But because I saw her building something from nothing. Alone. Without taking from anyone. And I wanted to support that. Vivianne stared at him, speechless for once. Brielle's eyes softened. Corbin looked ashamed. Alistair drew a steady breath. And now, I'm releasing that support to her fully. My heart stuttered. What? He smiled at me, small, warm, proud. You'll understand soon. But first, there are boundaries to set. He turned to the three of them. From this day forward, Selene is no longer financially responsible for this household. Not for your debts. Not for your bills. Not for Brielle's equipment. Not for a single expense. Vivianne's face twisted. Dad, you're destroying this family dynamic. No, he said. I'm rebuilding it. He stepped beside me. This ends now. The air in the room changed. Shifted. Sharpened. And I had the strange sensation that a chapter of our lives had just slammed shut. But the next part was one none of us expected. Because just when I thought the truth had fully surfaced, Alistair revealed a decision he'd been hiding for years, a decision powerful enough to rebuild my life from the ground up. For a moment, I thought the worst was behind us, that the confrontation had reached its peak and the dust was finally beginning to settle. But Alistair's expression told me otherwise. There was still something he hadn't said. Something heavier. Something none of us were prepared for. He took a breath, slow and deliberate, and placed one hand on the second stack of papers, the stack he'd kept secret for years. There's more you should know, he said. Vivianne crossed her arms tightly, her nails digging into the sleeves of her sweater. More? What else could you possibly accuse us of, Dad? He didn't answer her. Instead, he looked at me. Selene, he said softly, do you remember the fund I told you I started when you were just a child? The one I said I'd give you and Brielle someday? I frowned, nodding. I remember you saying something like that years ago, but we never talked about what happened to it. He tapped the papers again. I never divided it, he said. Because I never intended to. Vivianne stiffened instantly. What? Brielle blinked, confusion flooding her face. Corbin stopped breathing for a moment. But Alistair continued, his voice steady, unwavering, resolute. I built that fund for the grandchild who needed it most. Not the one who demanded the most. Not the one who was the loudest. Not the one who received every allowance, every opportunity, every ounce of parental attention. A beat passed. I built it for the grandchild who built something on her own, with no help. The one who never took more than she gave. The one who worked quietly while the rest of you treated her like a background character. My breath caught. Grandpa, I never. He held up a hand. I know, Selene. But it's time the truth comes out. He slid the stack of documents toward the center of the table. That fund, he said, is substantial. It's enough to give you real footing. Enough to secure your independence. Enough to remove you from a cycle that has drained you for years. Vivianne's voice shot across the room like a blade. Are you kidding me, Dad? You're rewarding her for being dramatic? For accusing her family of stealing from her? Vivianne, he said, I'm rewarding her for surviving you. The silence that followed was a crack of lightning. Brielle flinched at the words. Corbin's shoulders collapsed inward. Vivianne stood speechless for the first time all morning. Dad, she whispered, how could you say that to me? Because it's the truth. His voice softened, not to comfort her, but because truth didn't need volume. You created an environment where Selene's needs were dismissed at every turn. You treated her stability as a spare resource. You let her give and give until the child I knew, the one with spine and fire, turned into someone who apologized for existing. His gaze slid to me, warm and full of something fiercely protective. But she's waking up. And I'm going to make sure she never falls back into that shadow. Vivianne's lips trembled with fury. You always favored her. You always. No, he cut in. I favored no one. I simply paid attention. You ignored everything except what benefited you. Brielle spoke up, voice shaky. Grandpa, what does this mean for me? Alistair's tone softened, just slightly. It means you have a chance to rebuild your relationship with your sister. He paused. But not through entitlement. Not through guilt. Through respect. Brielle's eyes filled with something heartbreakingly young, confusion, guilt, fear. I didn't know Mom did all that. I thought Selene helped because she didn't mind. It wasn't your job to know, Alistair said gently. But now that you do, it's your job to grow. She swallowed hard, nodding. Vivianne slammed her hand against the table again. This is insanity. After everything I did for this family. You didn't do it for the family, Alistair said quietly. You did it for control. Vivianne's eyes burned with disbelief. You ungrateful. No, he interrupted. Not another word. She froze. I'm tired, Vivianne. Tired of pretending this family dynamic is healthy. Tired of watching you manipulate the people around you. Tired of your voice being the only one that matters in a room. He leaned forward. You raised Selene to be reliable. But you forgot to raise yourself to be fair. The truth cut through the room like a blade. Vivianne sank back into her chair, stunned silent. Corbin rubbed his forehead, shame radiating from him like heat. I should have stepped in. I didn't realize. You realized, Alistair corrected gently. You just didn't intervene. Corbin closed his eyes, the admission settling heavily over him. I remained still, absorbing the tidal wave of emotion washing across the room. I had spent years trying to shrink myself to keep peace. Hearing someone, finally, speak the truth out loud felt like oxygen filling my lungs for the first time in years. Alistair turned back to me. You won't be alone anymore, he said. You'll have resources. Space. Stability. And most importantly, freedom. You don't need this family's permission to exist. My throat tightened. Grandpa. He placed a gentle hand over mine. You spent your whole life giving, Selene. Now it's time to receive. The room was silent, charged, fragile. Vivianne stared at us like she didn't recognize either of us. So that's it, she whispered. You're choosing her over your own daughter? Alistair shook his head slowly. I'm not choosing her over you. I'm choosing what's right over what's comfortable. Vivianne's face crumpled, not with remorse, but with a fury too old and too deeply rooted to untangle in one morning. Brielle reached for her hand, but Vivianne drew away sharply. Corbin finally spoke again, voice weary. Dad, what happens now? Alistair straightened. Now, he said, Selene gets her car back. She gets the fund. She gets her boundaries respected. He looked at me. And she moves forward with her head high. A quiet shiver ran through me, equal parts fear and liberation. This was really happening. This wasn't a dream. This wasn't a moment that would fade. It was the beginning of something new. Something terrifying. Something beautiful. Vivianne stood abruptly, grabbing her purse with trembling hands. If that's how it's going to be, she snapped, then don't expect us to pretend things are normal. Alistair stepped aside, giving her space. Nothing about this has ever been normal, he said gently. She stormed out. Corbin followed, silent. Brielle lingered at the door, eyes wide and uncertain. I need time, she whispered to me. I nodded. Take it. She nodded back, then slipped out behind them. The door closed. The house fell silent. Alistair turned to me with a breath that seemed to release decades of tension. You're free now, he said softly. I didn't know how to respond. Because freedom, as beautiful as it sounded, was terrifying. And neither of us knew what the next week would bring. But that day wasn't done with me yet. Not by a long shot. Because just as I stood to gather my things, Alistair reached into a drawer and revealed something that would reshape the direction of my entire future. Because Alistair wasn't finished. What he placed in my hands next wasn't a gift, it was a catalyst, a choice that would force me to redefine who I was and who I wanted to become. When the door clicked shut behind my family, the silence that settled inside Alistair's house was unlike anything I'd felt before. It wasn't calm. It wasn't heavy. It felt, suspended, like the breath the world takes right before a storm changes direction. Alistair sighed, long and slow, then moved toward an old sideboard near the hallway. I'd seen the cabinet thousands of times growing up, but never noticed the bottom drawer, low, narrow, hidden beneath a basket of sewing supplies. He knelt, pulled the drawer open, and retrieved a thick, cream-colored envelope bound with twine. Something about the way he held it, carefully, reverently, sent a ripple of anticipation through me. He straightened, walked back to the table, and set the envelope in front of me. "This," he said softly, "is the part one never knew how to explain. Not until today." My pulse quickened. "What is it?" He tugged the twine loose and slid the papers out. The first page bore my name in his handwriting. Selene Ward, Studio Fund and Proposal. My breath hitched. "Studio Fund?" He nodded. "Open it." My fingers trembled as I lifted the first sheet. It wasn't a letter. It was a contract, drafted by a lawyer, dated nearly 2 years ago. My eyes scanned the text, trying to understand. It was a formal trust agreement. A real one. One that designated me as the sole beneficiary. "Grandpa," I whispered, "what is this?" Alistair leaned back in his chair, weathered hands folded across his stomach. "When your ornament studio first started gaining traction," he said, "I watched you pour everything into it. Your time. Your money. Your heart." He paused. "And I watched how this family took advantage of that." I swallowed, the truth of that landing heavier than any accusation. He continued, "So I began setting aside funds, in secret. Slowly at first, then more. It wasn't much in the beginning. But over time," he gestured toward the stack. "It grew." I stared down at the papers, disbelief settling in my bones. "How much is in it?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "Enough to secure a new studio space, hire help if you choose, expand your production, and give yourself breathing room for the next several years." My throat tightened. This wasn't a gift. It was a lifeline. One I never knew existed. I blinked through the blur in my eyes. "Grandpa, why didn't you tell me?" "Because you weren't ready," he said gently. "Not to receive it. To defend it." That sentence landed like truth peeled raw. He continued, voice steady. "You've spent your whole life shrinking so others wouldn't be uncomfortable. So they wouldn't feel threatened. So they wouldn't call you selfish, or dramatic, or ungrateful." I lowered my gaze. He wasn't wrong. "I wasn't going to hand you something valuable," he said, "until you were strong enough to protect it." A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. He reached out, brushed it away with the tenderness of someone who'd loved me long before I knew the world could be harsh. "Today," he said, "you showed your backbone." I gave a shaky laugh. "I didn't feel very strong." "You don't have to feel strong to be strong," he replied. "You just have to choose yourself. You did that today." I inhaled deeply, letting his words settle. "So what does this mean?" I whispered. "It means," he said, tapping the papers, "you have a future that doesn't involve being drained dry. It means you get to rebuild your life, on your terms, not your family's." Another sheet slid out, this one a proposal. A commercial lease recommendation. A list of available studios in the city. Notes in his handwriting beside each one. "You looked for spaces?" I asked, stunned. 4 months, he admitted. Just in case. My chest ached with something bittersweet, grief for the years I'd lost, and gratitude for what he'd quietly done. "But you don't need to decide today," he said. "Take your time. Visit them. Feel what fits." My mind raced, images of tall windows, open workspace, shelves of glittering ornaments lined up with room to breathe. Room to exist. Room to grow. "I don't even know where to start," I whispered. "That's fine," he said. "Start slow. Start with space. Everything else will follow." He smiled softly. "Let me help you move when the time comes." I nodded, wiping at my cheeks. "Okay." He squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you, Selene. You didn't break today. You woke up." I exhaled shakily. "I don't know what happens next." You begin again, he said. But this time, with clarity. I held the envelope tightly. This wasn't just money. It was validation. Recognition. Protection. A map out of the labyrinth I'd been navigating blind for years. It was every ounce of belief I never got from my parents. It was the foundation of a life I hadn't thought I deserved. We sat in silence for a while, comfortable, warm, steady. The kind of silence that lets bruised things breathe. When I finally stood to leave, he hugged me, arms firm, grounding. Go home, he said. Rest. Tomorrow, start fresh. I nodded and stepped into the cold morning air with the envelope clutched in my hands like treasure. As I walked down the driveway toward the rideshare idling at the curb, a strange thought dawned on me. For the first time in years, I had something of my own. Not borrowed. Not shared. Not taken. Mine. But the world wasn't finished shifting yet. Not by a long shot. Because when I got home and opened my banking app, I found something unexpected, something that told me Vivianne wasn't ready to accept the new boundaries Alistair had laid down. And what she'd done was about to ignite a storm none of us saw coming. Because what I discovered in my account that night wasn't an accident, it was a calculated move that proved my mother wasn't done fighting for control. And her next decision would push our fragile family to the edge. I didn't plan to check my bank account that night. I was exhausted, emotionally scraped raw, mentally spinning, physically drained from the confrontation. I wanted nothing more than to crawl into bed and sleep an entire week away. But something inside me, instinct, maybe, urged me to take one more look at my finances. Just one glance. Just to reassure myself that I wasn't imagining the weight of everything I had uncovered. I curled up on the corner of my couch, the envelope from Alistair still beside me, its presence steady and grounding. With a slow exhale, I opened my laptop, typed in my login, and waited. The moment the screen loaded, a chill ran down my spine. A withdrawal. Large. New. Timestamped 1 hour ago. My stomach dropped. I stared at the number again, blinking, hoping, desperately, that fatigue was warping my vision. But no. It was real. A clean, bold transaction. $450, household support, auto transfer. The words hit me like a punch. My hands trembled over the keyboard. That wasn't a bill. That wasn't an accident. It was the same temporary support Vivianne had set up months ago, a quiet siphon she insisted I keep in place to help the family during tight months. I had forgotten it existed. And she had used it. Even after everything that happened that morning. Even after being confronted. Even after being told the financial draining was over. She had taken more. On purpose. I felt my heart slam against my ribs, hot and cold all at once. A nausea rolled through me, slow, sickening, undeniable. She wasn't done. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't changing. She was retaliating. My breath shook as I reached for my phone. My fingers hovered over Alistair's name, then dropped away. He had done enough today. I couldn't pile more worry onto him. Instead, I forced myself to breathe. Slowly. Steadily. This is not happening, I whispered into the silence of my tiny apartment. She wouldn't. But she would. And she did. I locked the auto-transfer immediately. Then I checked my linked accounts. Subscriptions. Recurring charges. Shared payments. And there it was, one after another, transactions I hadn't realized were still tied to me. An internet bill I didn't use. A collab software subscription that belonged to Brielle. A streaming service I didn't even know existed. 3 old auto-renewals Vivianne never removed because you make more than you need. A quiet fury rose in me, hotter than shock, cleaner than sadness. Anger. Pure. Uncomplicated. Righteous. Not the explosive kind that shatters things. The kind that sharpens them. I cancelled everything, every shared responsibility, every loophole, every silent hold they had on me. I severed the umbilical cord they'd attached to my income without my consent. By the time I closed my laptop, my hands were shaking so badly I had to sit on them just to steady myself. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept replaying the day in my mind, Alistair's voice, Vivianne's anger, Brielle's guilt, Corbin's silence. And the quiet certainty that this wasn't over. Boundaries don't break families. Entitlement does. And Vivianne's entitlement was already gearing up for war. The next morning, I walked into my studio with the envelope tucked safely in my bag. The familiar scent of pine and paint greeted me, and for a moment, I let myself sink into the comfort of it. This little workshop had always been my refuge. My sanctuary. My world. But that morning, it felt different. Too small. Too cramped. Like it had been holding me instead of freeing me. I set my coat down, flicked on the lamp above my workbench, and began packing orders. For an hour, I lost myself in the familiar motions, tying ribbons, sealing packages, checking addresses. The world outside softened into a blur. Then my phone buzzed. I froze. Vivianne. Her name glowed on the screen like a warning. For a long moment, I simply stared, trying to steady my breath. Finally, I answered. Her voice came through sharp and controlled, like she had spent all night rehearsing. Selene, she said without greeting, we need to talk. My grip on the phone tightened. About what? Don't play coy, she snapped. Your grandfather made a scene yesterday, an unnecessary one. And now I'm hearing that you've cancelled things. Subscriptions. Payments. Transfers. I cancelled what shouldn't have been my responsibility, I said quietly. She scoffed. Responsibility? You're exaggerating again. This family relies on each other. That's not what this has been, I cut in, surprising myself with the steadiness in my tone. This hasn't been support. It's been dependency. And only one side has been giving. Are you seriously going to punish us financially because you're in your feelings? She shot back. I felt something inside me click, like a lock turning. This isn't punishment, I said. It's correction. Vivianne's breath grew sharp. You don't get to talk to me like this. Not after everything I've done for you. And what have you done for me? My voice trembled, not with fear, with truth. What did you give me that didn't cost me twice as much emotionally? Silence. Cold. Seething. Then. You're ungrateful, she whispered. Ungrateful and selfish. Brielle needed that car. She needed support. And you were supposed to understand that. I understand plenty, I said. I understand I've spent years making myself smaller so you could feel bigger. Stop using that dramatic language, she snapped. It's not drama, I said. It's reality. She exhaled sharply, furious enough that I could hear her pacing. If you think, she hissed, that you're going to take everything and leave us scrambling, you're mistaken. I won't let you destroy this family. My chest tightened. I'm not destroying anything. I'm just refusing to be drained anymore. Vivianne's voice dropped, cold, dangerous, final. Then don't expect this family to support you when you fall. That sentence dug in deep. Not because of what it meant, but because it revealed everything. Love, in her world, was conditional. Transactional. A ledger she believed she controlled. She waited for my response. I didn't give her the one she expected. I'm not going to fall, I said quietly. Not anymore. And I hung up. My hand trembled as I lowered the phone. Not from fear. From the realization that I had just crossed a line I couldn't uncross. A line she couldn't control. I sat down slowly, letting the reality settle into my bones. Vivianne wasn't going to let this go. She wasn't going to accept the shift in power. And she certainly wasn't going to respect the boundaries I'd put in place. She was gearing up for a fight. But she didn't know something important. Something Alistair had prepared me for. I wasn't fighting alone anymore. Still. When the knock came at my studio door that afternoon, I wasn't ready. Because standing outside wasn't Vivianne. It was Brielle. And the expression on her face told me everything was about to change. Because Brielle hadn't come to argue, she'd come with a confession. One that would shatter the last illusion I had about our family, and push the story toward its breaking point. When I opened the studio door, Brielle stood there with her hood pulled up and her hands shoved into her sleeves like she was trying to shrink into herself. She looked nothing like the polished, camera-ready girl who filled her online feeds. Her mascara was smudged. Her eyes were red. And she wasn't wearing a single piece of clothing chosen for aesthetic or algorithmic appeal. Just a sister. Just Brielle. Raw. Unfiltered. Human. "Can I come in?" she whispered. I hesitated. Not from anger, though anger was there, but from caution. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure what her intentions were. I stepped aside. Yeah. She slipped inside, arms wrapped around her waist, gaze sweeping the room, the paint-splattered floor, the half-finished ornaments lining my shelves, the tiny heater humming in the corner. "This place is smaller than I thought," she murmured. I raised an eyebrow. "You've been here before." "Not really," she said softly. "I mean, I visited. But I never looked." She sank onto the small stool by my workbench, pulling her legs up like a child trying to make herself lighter. I stayed standing. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the faint crackle of the heater. Finally, Brielle inhaled shakily. "Mom's furious." I kept my posture still. Neutral. "I know. She says you're destroying the family." "I'm not," I said. "I'm protecting myself." She nodded, eyes fixed on the floor. "I know that too." Silence again. Then she whispered, "I didn't come here to fight." "What did you come for?" She swallowed hard, hands twisting in her sleeves. "To tell you the truth." My heart ticked faster. A quiet warning. "Go on," I said. Brielle lifted her gaze, and something in her eyes shifted, something I'd never seen before. Not entitlement. Not arrogance. Not the carefully curated confidence she wore online. Guilt. Real guilt. "Mom told me you didn't care about the car," she said. "She said you offered it whenever I needed it. She told me you hardly used it for your little crafts and that she was just managing things so we didn't fight." I clenched my jaw. "That's not true." She knew that wasn't true. "I know," Brielle whispered. "But I didn't." I believed her. For a moment, pain pricked behind my eyes, not because of Brielle's words, but because of how easy it had been to manipulate her. She had always lived in Vivianne's orbit, always absorbed her version of reality. "What about the money?" I asked. "The purchases? The subscriptions?" Brielle's cheeks flushed. Shame crept across her expression like spreading ink. "That's why I'm here," she whispered. "To tell you something I should have told you months ago." She drew in a trembling breath. "Mom didn't just use your account for convenience," she said. "She used it to hide things." My heart lurched. "What things?" Brielle's eyes filled with tears. Bills she didn't want Dad to see. Payments she didn't want to explain. Times when her influencer deals didn't pay what she bragged about. She'd say things like, "It's fine, Selene makes more than she needs," or "She doesn't know how to spend her money anyway," and she'd move the charge to you. A cold wave washed down my spine. "She told you that?" I asked softly. Brielle nodded miserably. "A lot. At first I thought it was normal. Families help each other, right?" But then she started doing it more. And when I'd ask where she got the money for something, she'd say, "She swallowed. Selene handled it." I felt something inside me break, not loudly. Quietly. Like the final split in something long cracked. I'm sorry, Brielle choked. I should have asked more questions. I should have noticed. But I trusted Mom. She's always controlled everything. I didn't realize she was, her voice wavered. Using you. I sat down across from her slowly, breath trembling in my chest. Her confession wasn't just a revelation. It was a wound being pressed open. But also, maybe, cleaned. Brie, I said gently, why tell me now? Because Grandpa was right, she whispered. About everything. And because last night, after you left, Mom completely lost it. She said you were ungrateful and dramatic, and that you were trying to turn Grandpa against us. And then, Brielle's words faltered. She said something I can't forget. What? She said, if Selene wants to act like she's better than us, let her pay for it. A chill ran through me. She said, I'll make her regret this. My stomach twisted. That withdrawal. Of course. Brielle wiped her face with her sleeve. And then she said she'd tell Grandpa the money should have gone to me instead. And that you don't know how to handle responsibility. I closed my eyes for a moment. There it was. The truth I'd avoided seeing clearly for so long. Vivianne didn't just take from me. She resented me. For being responsible. For working quietly. For having something she couldn't control. Brielle's voice cracked. I don't want to be part of that. I don't want to be like her. And I don't want to lose you. My chest tightened. This was the first time in years she had spoken to me as a sister, not a competitor, not an annoyance, not the invisible backup dancer to her front-facing life. I'm sorry, Selene, she whispered again. For the car. For the money. For letting her treat you like the family bank. I'm so sorry. I reached across the table and took her trembling hand. I know, I said softly. And I forgive you. A sob escaped her. She covered her face, crying quietly, the kind of crying that releases years of tension. She whispered into her palms, I want to do better. I know, I said again. We stayed like that for a long moment, two sisters finally meeting in the middle, without Vivianne's narrative shaping the space between us. Finally, Brielle straightened and wiped her tears. There's one more thing, she said, voice steadier now. Something I didn't want to believe. Something Grandpa hinted at but didn't say. I froze. What thing? She hesitated. Mom didn't just redirect your money, she said slowly. I held my breath. She used your name. My heart dropped. What do you mean? I whispered. Brielle swallowed. She used your identity, your credit, your business information, when she needed approvals for payments she couldn't make. When she needed to open accounts. When she needed to avoid a late notice. When she needed something to look stable. My blood turned cold. She told me it was fine, Brielle added quickly. She said you knew. But Grandpa's documents. I think he was gathering proof. I felt the world tilt under me. Identity. Credit. Approvals. Oh my God, I breathed, gripping the edge of the table. She didn't. Brielle nodded miserably. She did. Everything went quiet. The heater hummed. The wind rustled outside. And the truth settled like a stone in my stomach. This wasn't just boundary crossing. This wasn't just financial draining. This was fraud. A betrayal so deep, so calculated, so intentional, it made everything else suddenly click into horrifying clarity. My mother hadn't just taken from me. She had impersonated me. And this time, there was no denying it. No minimizing. No pretending it was family help. This was something else entirely. I stood slowly, heart pounding. Brielle, I whispered, I need to tell Grandpa. She nodded, eyes wide. I know. I'm coming with you. But the moment we stepped outside my studio, my phone rang. Alistair. My heartbeat thundered. I answered. His voice was low. Urgent. Unsteady in a way I had never heard. Selene, he said, I need you to come to my house. Now. My pulse spiked. What happened? A long, heavy pause. Your mother is here, he said. And she's not leaving. Because the confrontation waiting for me at Alistair's house would become the most explosive one yet, a reckoning that would tear open every secret my mother never meant for me to uncover. Brielle and I drove to Alistair's house in silence, the kind of silence that isn't empty, but brimming. With dread. With truth. With the knowledge that the next hour could reshape our entire family forever. The sky was gray, washed out, the kind of winter morning that feels like the world is holding its breath. When we pulled into the driveway, Alistair's truck was parked crookedly, as if he'd left it in a hurry. The front door was open, just a few inches, but enough to make my chest tighten. Inside, raised voices pulsed through the house. Vivianne's voice. Sharp. Commanding. Wounded, but not with honesty. With pride. You can't do this, Dad. You can't lie to my daughter and warp her against me. Then Alistair's voice. Firm. Unyielding. I'm not warping anything. I'm showing her the truth you've hidden. I felt Brielle flinch beside me. We stepped inside. Vivianne spun toward us immediately, eyes blazing, cheeks flushed with rage. Of course, she hissed, you brought her. The two of you are teaming up now. Brielle shrank back, but I stepped forward. This ends today, I said softly. Vivianne laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Ends? You don't get to decide when anything ends, Selene. You've spent your whole life being the good daughter, the quiet one, the reliable one. And now you think one little pity meeting with Dad gives you power? No, Alistair said, stepping between us. Her power comes from the truth. Vivianne's eyes narrowed at him, then flicked back toward us. What truth? That I raised two ungrateful girls? That you, she jabbed a finger toward me, are trying to split this family apart? I inhaled slowly, choosing my words with care. I didn't split this family, I said. You did. Every time you lied. Every time you took what wasn't yours. Every time you used my name without permission. That last part hit her like a slap. Her face drained of color. Alistair stepped closer. Yes, Vivianne. She knows. We all know. For the first time, Vivianne's mask cracked, not from anger but fear. What did you tell her? She whispered. The truth, Brielle said quietly. That you used her identity. Vivianne whirled on her. You told her that? After everything I've done for you? No, Brielle said firmly, meeting her gaze. After everything you've done to her. A tremor ran through Vivianne's body, anger and desperation pulsing off her like heat waves. You don't understand, she snapped. There were bills. Your father was drowning. I was drowning. If I hadn't used Selene's name. You had no right, I said. Vivianne's voice rose, trembling with self-justification. I had no choice. You had every choice, Alistair countered. You just didn't want to take responsibility. Her eyes flicked to him, pleading. Dad, you of all people should understand. I was trying to keep everything together, our home, our girls, our life. Corbin couldn't handle it. I did what I had to. No, he said. You did what was easiest. Vivianne shook her head frantically, pacing. You don't get it. Selene always had more. More stability. More talent. More patience. She could afford to help. She should have helped. My breath caught. Should have? I repeated quietly. Because I existed? She stopped pacing. Her eyes met mine, exhausted, resentful, brittle. You don't understand what it's like, she whispered. To watch one daughter struggle to be seen and the other become invisible on purpose. You hiding in your little workshop, doing your little crafts. My business, I corrected, voice steady. Not crafts. Not hobbies. Not distractions. My business. She went silent. My work matters, I continued. And you turned it into a community property. You took everything I built and handed it out like it belonged to you. Vivianne's chin trembled. I just wanted what was best for the family. But only when it benefited you, Brielle whispered. Vivianne blinked, stunned by her own daughter's words. You used my name, I said softly. You took money from me. You took my car. You dismissed my boundaries. You used my credit. And worst of all, you convinced yourself that I owed you for the privilege. Vivianne's breath hitched. I didn't mean. Yes, I said gently. You did. For a moment, the house felt eerily still. Then Alistair stepped forward, voice low but unwavering. I've already contacted my attorney, he said. Vivianne's head snapped up. What? I needed to understand what protections Selene required, he continued. And what consequences you may face. Her face twisted. How dare you? I am your daughter, your only daughter, and you're threatening me with legal action? I'm not threatening you, he said. I'm outlining reality. She shook her head violently. No. No. You can't do this. You can't destroy us over a misunderstanding. It's not a misunderstanding, he said. It's years of mismanagement, manipulation, and entitlement. Vivianne looked between the three of us, me, Brielle, Alistair, and for the first time, she looked alone. Truly alone. Her voice dropped to a whisper. So what? You want me out of the family? You want to exile me? No, I said quietly. I want boundaries. Alistair nodded. And accountability. Brielle added, and honesty. Vivianne stared at us, chest rising and falling rapidly. Then something inside her broke. She sank into a chair, looking suddenly small. Exhausted. Human. I didn't know how to stop, she whispered. I didn't know how to let go of control. If I didn't handle everything, everything would fall apart. Alistair sat beside her, his voice soft but firm. Nothing fell apart. You simply refused to let anyone else hold the reins, not even when it harmed them. Vivianne covered her face with trembling hands. I messed everything up, didn't I? No one spoke. She wasn't ready for forgiveness. But she was finally ready for the truth. It isn't too late to change, I said. But you can't keep pretending your intentions erase the harm. She lowered her hands, eyes swollen. What do you want from me? Accountability, I said. Transparency. And distance. For now. She nodded slowly, defeated, but listening. And the car, she whispered. It's mine, I replied gently. You know that. She nodded again. And the money? You'll repay what you can, Alistair answered. And the rest will be handled legally, not emotionally. Vivianne swallowed. Okay. It wasn't a full apology. Not yet. But it was the closest she had come in years. And for now. It was enough. Weeks later. My new studio was warm, bright, sunlit. Shelves lined the walls. Orders piled in carefully labeled bins. A tiny bell chimed whenever the door opened. Alistair visited often, never empty-handed. Brielle came too. Sometimes to buy ornaments. Sometimes just to sit with me. She was learning to grow away from Vivianne's shadow. And Vivianne? She kept her distance. Her messages were short. Simple. Respectful. She was trying. And trying was better than pretending. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the Seattle skyline, I stood in my new space and realized something. I had finally built a life that was mine. Not borrowed. Not shared. Not drained. Mine. Alistair's voice echoed in my memory. Boundaries aren't walls, Selene. They're doors. And you choose who you let through. I exhaled, feeling my future settle comfortably on my shoulders. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't silent. I wasn't small. I was free. And for the first time, that was enough.